name is Tess Fields. I'm with the training committee in site remediation, and I want to welcome everybody to the Commingled Plume Technical Guidance Training that we have today. There are, let's see, we have a room full of people. This is awesome. Usually we talk to a half-empty crowd, but this is very good. And we have between 200 and 300 people on the webinar. So we're happy about that too. Okay, an application has been made to the board for credits for this training. It happens to be for 2 regulatory credits and 1 technical credit. And everybody, all the people who want credit for it, if you're in the room, you know you have to sign in, which I believe you did, and you have to remember to sign out. And then on the webinar, you folks will have to do a little bit more. You'll have to answer the quiz questions as we go along, and you cannot miss much in the way of time. Okay, in your packets, you'll have packets on your chairs, and I think emailed to the webinar folks are the slides. We also have an agenda, and we have a lovely green piece of paper, which is the course evaluation. Myself and Sana will tackle you if you don't hand this in, filled out and to the best of your ability. Now, because we read them and we pay attention and we do things with the information. Okay, one thing this is not pertaining to this class, but I wanted to make a statement about what's going on with the state case study training we do at Rutgers. It's the prerequisite training for LSRPs to take the exam. We have been doing it twice a year for, I think, 6-7 years, I don't know, a long time. And I believe this is the last time we're doing it twice a year, so we'll be doing it in early October. And then from then on, we're going to do it no more than once a year and probably the beginning of June. But that information will go out there. So we don't, Janine McGregor doesn't want to hear, I didn't know I had to take the class when you submit your application. So you've been warned. Okay, the way we get credits for you online and in person or the webinar folks, we will email a list of people who meet the requirements. We know if you log off and go shopping, you know, or take a nap. So at the end, all the people that earned the credits we send to the LSRPA. They send you a link, you send them money, they send you a certificate, and everybody is happy. Okay, this is a different looking quiz slide. Test your knowledge. In order for the webinar folks to get credits, they have to answer at least 3 out of the 4 questions. And they're really, the questions in the answers are somewhat related to each other and they're not difficult. So when we get there, the webinar folks, we have to give them a minute to answer, and I'll quiz the audience in the room, and then we'll ask Rob Lux what his vacation plans are for the summer. Okay, this is a reminder. Everybody mute your phones. Nobody's reaching for their phones. They're so good. Ira, if your phone goes off, you're in trouble. Of course, you're going to take any calls outside the room. When we get to the question and answer period, they are listed on the agenda. We will have microphones to come to you, and so that you can ask your question loud enough for everyone in the room and everyone on the webinar to hear. We will also take webinar questions as they come up. I said this. Okay, and this is for the people that forget to sign out, because I had a couple of those last time. Oh, now we get to hear all the cool things that the LSRPA is doing from Mark Fisher. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks.
Anytime.
Good afternoon, everybody. Did you take my clicker?
It's all sweaty.
Okay. As Tessie mentioned, I'm Mark Fisher. In this capacity, I'm here representing the LSRPA. The LSRPA typically will partner with the department when they do these training sessions. Oops, wrong way. Not only to assist in the credits, but to facilitate with the refreshments, etc. So enjoy coffee on the LSRPA. Your dues at work. The LSRPA is also assisted greatly by our sponsors. There's different levels of sponsors. You can find them all on our website. There's a whole host of them here. As Tessie mentioned, this course today is being applied for CECs. There are continuing education requirements for those of you who are LSRPs. You probably all know that. And during your renewal period, that 3-year renewal period, you have minimum CEC requirements. Those are listed here. And the ethics course is starred because there seems to be a lot of controversy with the LSRPs about the timing and the availability of ethics course. So just so everyone is aware, the LSRPA does offer their ethics course. It's a 3-credit course to meet the minimum requirements. We do that 6 times during a 3-year license period. Typically, we do it twice a year in the spring and in the fall, and it's held throughout the various parts of the state. Our next ethics course is in September in Somerset, and then there's another one scheduled in January of 2018. If you are an LSRP, you want to register, by all means, please go to our website, lsrpa.org, to do that. One of the things to keep in mind about the ethics course is that in the past, apparently, there's been some issues with license renewals and the timings of folks forgetting possibly to complete their ethics course. And so, again, this is more of a reminder for everybody to make sure that you pay attention to that, make sure that you are registering in time, and I'll talk a little bit about the timing of things as well, so everybody's clear on that. With regard to continuing ed, just so, again, LSRPs are aware, there's essentially 2 categories where you can gain continuing education credits. One is basically by attending courses or instructional seminars where you get 1 CEC for each hour of participation in that class. If you are teaching a course, or you're doing a presentation, or you're doing a paper at a conference, you also, as an individual doing that, are eligible for continuing education credits in the activities category. So don't forget, if you're very active, if you're out doing things, you're talking, you might be eligible for CECs. You just have to make an application to the board to be able to do that. We were asked to do a public service announcement from the licensing board. And this has to do with tracking your continuing education credits for each of your renewal cycles. As I mentioned, the most common issue seems to be on the timing. So bear in mind that your renewal application is due to the licensing board 90 days before your expiration date. And at that time of application, you have to have all your CECs completed. So it's not advisable for you to come in and say, you know, here's my application. I still have 15 credits to take. I'm going to do those in the next 6 weeks. In all likelihood, your application is going to be rejected. So please, by all means, make your life easier by making sure you have all your CECs in place and documented by the time you make your application. Speaking of courses, if you go to the LSRPA's website, there's a number of courses that we have scheduled throughout the balance of the year. Those are all listed here in your handouts. They're listed on the website, so please visit that. In particular, there is a full-day commingled Plume trading course for those of you who can't get enough of this topic on January 25th. where we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the technical issues and some of the resolution issues that we won't be able to do today. A few other LSRPA initiatives. I don't know if we're calling it this, but the big conference. We're doing a 2-day conference in the beginning of the year where we'll have multi courses being offered. We're going to tie that in with our annual meeting. So we look for information with regard to that coming soon. A couple other more recent things. We just did a white paper on historic fill, which is very interesting. Those of you who deal with historic fill, I urge you to take a look at that. We have a course listing on our website of all the available CEC courses that are out there. We have a tracking tool to track your CECs so you can keep track of all your requirements and completed courses during your 3-year cycle. We have a list of LSRPs who are willing to participate in dispute resolution. We're not endorsing any of those people. Those are all strictly volunteers. If you have a situation where you're looking for someone to mediate or try to help resolve a dispute between LSRPs or adversarial parties, these individuals have volunteered to make their services available, so contact them directly. And we also have a sounding board. The sounding board is for LSRPs. We started this in response to some of the smaller shops where LSRPs are sole practitioners or are in small firms where they don't have the opportunity to engage in as much dialogue as some of us that have multiple LSRPs in our firms. And you can write in and ask a question, and then there's a team of LSRPs that will sort of skull over your question and then provide a response back to you, a verbal response. It's obviously a non-binding and a full legal disclaimers on our website. But it's a way to help provide some feedback for LSRPs who don't necessarily have that, or any LSRP that may have a difficult question where they're looking for some additional input on. The LSRP also has a bunch of social media. We have a LinkedIn page, a Facebook page. Apparently we are tweeting now, so that's very exciting. On our LinkedIn page, we actually do have some discussion topics that come up. Anybody can join that. If you're a LinkedIn member, you can join that LinkedIn LSRP LinkedIn page, and we do announcements in there, and there's also some discussion topics that happen. As the LSRPA is always encouraging people to get involved, so those of you who are LSRPs, and say even non-LSRPs, if you want to be a part of the various committees that the LSRPA is involved in, we do things like work on these guidance documents. We have periodic meetings with different management groups within the department and try to provide feedback to our membership. But by all means, if you see something that you'd like to get involved with, just reach out. You can email the general mailbox and the LSRPA website, and we'll get you involved. So that's it on the LSRPA, and with that, I think we're going to get started with the actual course, and I'd like to introduce Marianne Kuserk, who will kick things off. One other thing, too, I forgot to put this in your package, but the LSRPA did a fact sheet on the LSRP program and what the LSRPA is all about. I left a bunch of them at the table. You can get them from our website. It's sort of just general information about what an LSRP is, what the program is about, and what the association does. So if you want to pick those up, they're up the front desk. Thanks.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Sure. Uh-oh. No. Oh, there we go.
Switch.
Which Tessie, how's this?
The one that's worn off.
That's what I pushed first time. Okay. All right. For those who don't know me, I'm Marianne Kuserk. I'm Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Groundwater Pollution Abatement and also the lucky chair for this committee. So I'm just going over pretty much a document overview and an introduction to the process. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that was on the committee. Here's a list of the DEP folk as well as some of the external stakeholders. We've been working on this document, it's got to be 3 years or so. There's a lot of technical difficulties and a lot of administrative changes and tweaks and idiosyncrasies and nuances to the process. So I think most of us are here today. John's home with the flu. Let me see. Lisa hurt her foot, so you're going to be listening to me again twice instead of just one other time. So anyway, most of us are here today.
People retired?
Yes, yes. George Nicholas recently, and Mr. George Bleichkin was also retired a while ago, but figured we'd put them on. Okay. All right. Just an overview of this technical guidance document. There are certain things that it does. It defines what a commingled plume condition is. It discusses several common commingled plume scenarios. During our discussions, there were certain scenarios that we see a lot, so that's how the guidance document is broken up a little bit. Describe some processes of investigating the contamination and tools to come up with your technical lines of evidence to reach your remedial decisions. Identify technical tools and techniques to establish those multiple lines of evidence. We also have a list of possible resolution mechanisms that vary from, one of them is the LSRP mediation process versus if you can't come up, go to court, or ideally work together. It also outlines some administrative procedures, issuing an RAO and remedial action permit compliance. Mike Infanger will be going through that in detail. We had to come up with a slightly different process for that, so and different notices and things that you need to include in your RAO. Also at the end we have some case studies for some more common or commingled plume scenarios that we see fairly often. Okay. First of all, the definition of a commingled plume, or commingled plume condition. A commingled plume condition exists when groundwater plumes originating from two or more temporally or spatially discrete contaminant discharges have mixed or encroached upon one another to the extent that the remediation performed on one plume will affect the remediation of the other contaminant plume. Basically, there are some examples that plumes are one's off-site, one's on. We have certain examples in a scenario where there's two on the same site, but time has passed, so there's two different owners that are responsible for each part, and we'll go through that in more detail. Oh, these are out of order. There we go. These are a little bit out of order. Some of the commingled plume scenarios that we came up with, I want to stress that these are based on technical differences and more commonly administrative differences. If you have these different scenarios, how to get in and out of the process is slightly different, so that's why they're broken up this way. We either have off-site sources, different or similar constituents, or on-site sources with obviously different or similar constituents. And the similar constituents, we sometimes refer to that as the overprinting scenario. This is a, in particular, some of the service station folks were concerned about that. There's a spill from a tank system, and then that person leaves the site, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years later, there's another release at the site, and how to differentiate who's responsible for what. This does not address off-site sources that come onto your site that have not commingled. We want to stress that the off-site, and we reference that several times in the presentation, the off-site groundwater source investigation technical guidance document is what you'll use. And like I said, we reference that on some occasions. Oops, go back for a second. Okay. No, they got put out of order, so I'm just gonna.
Oh, okay.
It's fine.
Go back.
Go back what?
Go back.
No.
Oh,
No, I know. Whatever, I got it.
I'm talking about the quiz. It's supposed to pop up.
Oh.
We'll see what happens.
Oh, that's okay. That's not me. Some of the other terms that are specific to this document are lines of evidence that refers to information to help support a conclusion. This document focuses on establishing and developing multiple lines of evidence that when you are assessed cumulatively, they can reduce uncertainty and provide support for the remedial decisions. The next term is also, that I kind of discussed, is overprinting, and that's a condition when results that are temporarily discrete discharges are co-located on the same site. Okay. Here's the quiz.
All right. All right. We have a quiz. So the guys are going to open it up. webinar folks? Okay, so the question, and I want you guys all to pay attention in the room, and you're not going to yell out the answer, you're going to raise your hands. Okay, for off-site sources, if the Plume is not commingled, which DEP technical guidance document can be used to conduct additional investigation? Click.
I am.
I guess you click.
I am.
You are?
I'm clicking.
You're clicking?
I'm clicking.
All right, I guess it appears to be very low. This is very odd. Okay, don't worry about it. Okay.
All right. I'm clicking.
Number A, Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. Nobody? Anybody? No? Okay. Or B, it would be the Green Sustainable Remediation. No, nobody looks interested. How about the off-site source groundwater investigation technical guidance? Did I say don't yell out? I said raise your hands. Raise your hands when you're supposed to. Come on. Okay, yes. Huh? They can't see, but they could hear you go. Oh, we have a question. Did you want to say Lorax? No. Okay. So we need to give the guys, our webinar folks, 1 whole minute. So, Rob, what are you doing for vacation this year?
Staying away from you.
He's staying away from me. That is mean. And look how red he got. That's all right. It's worth every minute. All right. How are we doing as far as time? Good? Okay. Very good. All right. We're going to move on.
Okay. There we go. Now it's working. All right. There you go.
Yay!
That's the correct answer. Okay. Okay. So what's some pieces of information or data that you've gathered that can show that you possibly may have a commingled plume? You know, when you have some of these conditions, it may behoove you to evaluate if you have a commingled plume or not. The presence of contamination different than those under investigations. The obvious, easiest scenario is you're dealing with an underground storage tank. You're sampling for your BTEX, doing your volatile scan, then all of a sudden PCE shows up in your well, and that's probably not from you. If you see changes in the ratios of contaminants detected, obviously you have to take into account degradation, especially for chlorinateds, but that's one indication. Changes in some of the geochemical conditions at the site. If you have unexplained sustained increases in contaminant concentrations, one of the scenarios we go through uses that as an example. And also if you've modeled your plume and the plume length or the configuration is different than what you predicted with the models, and you know, basically stuff doesn't make sense, that may be something to take a look at.
Could I ask a question on that?
Sure. Well, we have questions.
Wait,
I think there's questions after me, aren't there?
Yep. I know, after Mark.
After Mark?
Can you hold on to that?
Okay. You know, obviously these are just, you know, things if you may want to take a, you know, when have this condition, you may want to take a look at possible commingled plume. There's a few general rules that kind of are overarching throughout the document that you'll see. One thing we try to stress when we use similar contaminants versus different constituents and different contaminants is justifying commingled plumes with different contaminant signatures. Sometimes it's a little more straightforward and not quite as complicated. If you've got 2 discharges of TCE from 2 different places, it makes it a little more complicated. And you likely are going to have to develop more and more complex multiple lines of evidence to make that determination. Also, one of the things that we also want to stress is during our comment period, we received a lot of comments about, especially with our not the technical aspects or some of the administrative processes, but with a lot of the variant or resolution mechanisms and such, there was concern that if you didn't use one of those, you'd have to go in and justify why you didn't. That's not what they're in there as suggestions and things you may want to look at. So you don't need to come in with a variance or justify why you didn't follow all of those resolution mechanisms. The technical tools is the same thing. They're out there. They aren't appropriate for everything. There's also more technical tools that we didn't go out or aren't in the guidance document that may help you with your cause. So you don't necessarily need to satisfy that regulatory obligation by trying to justify some things. I think that's pretty much all I had for the general overview. Okay, and yes, Mr. Fisher will be back. He's going to briefly describe some of the technical tools and such that are in the guidance document.
Oh, that was for her. Sorry. Thanks for clarifying that, Tessie. Appreciate that. Yeah. Mary Ann mentioned that the guidance document talks quite a bit about using multiple lines of evidence to investigate and to address commingled plumes. So the document spends a good bit of time, talking about what are lines of evidence, and how are they defined, and basically is defined in the guidance document. It's information that helps support a conclusion. Typically a single line of evidence isn't going to get you over the bar, hence the terminology multiple lines of evidence. I mean, there may be situations where a single line of evidence will work, but more often than not, it's better to have more than one to establish your technical position with regard to commingled plumes. And also with most things, your investigation can, by using multiple lines of evidence, can reduce some of your uncertainty and provide support for your remedial decisions. So the guidance document talks about various lines of evidence that can be used. And as Mary Ann mentioned, and this is really important to note on the bottom, that there are more lines of evidence that exist than are outlined in the guidance document. One of the things we tried to do is pull information from the folks that were on the guidance committee, also reaching out to the various stakeholder groups that had representation on the guidance document committee to come up with what are the most common lines of evidence that people are utilizing when they're dealing with commingled plumes. However, that is not to say that there aren't other options. And again, I think that that's one of the things, we got a lot of comments on that. Not only the point that Mary Ann mentioned before about I don't have to justify why I'm not using, you don't have to prove the negative on why you didn't use 6 of these lines of evidence. You just have to justify why it's appropriate in whatever lines of evidence you have picked for your site. So then the document goes into, what are these lines of evidence that we're talking about? The first one is the department's database. So all those EDDs that we have been submitting for the last 20 years supposedly are all residing in a database that exists that the department has access to. Some folks have reached out to Henry Kindervater. I think he has been the gatekeeper for most of this in the past. We don't want to necessarily tie this to him. So in Appendix C, we talk about, how do you access that information? There are different ways to get it, different ways that it can be delivered to you. A lot of it has to do with how you ask the question. So we would encourage you to, if you're looking for sources sometimes, or you're looking for information about a site that may already exist that you know about, but you're having difficulty gaining access to the data either through a file review or whatever means, you can reach out to the department and they can export to you this data. So don't ignore that as a possibility, and they can do a reasonably decent search around your site for those types of that type of information. The USGS also has something called a groundwater watch, and that is a database that they maintain. And within that database, it's information from state and federal studies, supposedly over the past 100 years, so there's a lot of information in there. More often than not, that doesn't have anything to do with contaminated sites. It has to do with water use, flow-related information within various aquifers, influences that pumping regimes might have on groundwater usage in the different aquifers. But again, it's important to know if something's looking a little wonky with regard to groundwater fate and transport or groundwater flow on your site. Some other multiple lines of evidence areas to look into is the New Jersey GeoWeb. So how many people have ever accessed GeoWeb? A lot of hands, very good. There's a lot of information in GeoWeb, more than just what you might think with regard to, you know, plotting an SRP site or looking at a CEA. There's quite a bit of information in there, and I think that there actually is a GIS course that's offered periodically that the department's involved with, where they'll go through what's available in GeoWeb. There's quite a bit of information that's in there. It's not just, like I said, it's not just SRP information. It's all information that can be really helpful with regard to identifying what might be a possible source to a commingled situation. Of course, there's Data Miner. Data Miner, for those of you who don't know, is a list of all the SRP sites and other regulated activities that the SRP is involved with. More often than not, people use it to look up statuses of adjacent sites, what information might be available in terms of reports, etc. Again, all that information can be helpful if you're trying to gain information on informing your commingled plume situation. We discuss other commonly available sources as well in terms of establishing your multiple lines of evidence. Those commercially available packages that typically include Sanborn maps, historic aerials, historic topos. A lot of times some good information can be found at the municipal level if you do a FOIA request. So all those are good places to look for as you're gathering your information, putting together your multiple lines of evidence. One of the things we talk about quite a bit in the guidance document, and it's discussed in a lot of our case studies, is using actual groundwater data from your site. And typically, when you're doing your investigation and you encounter a commingled plume scenario, you're going to want to collect some data that might be beyond what you normally might need to collect to satisfy your basic RI obligations. Those are all things that you should be thinking about as you're developing your lines of evidence. Sometimes those pieces of information are easy to obtain. Sometimes it's not so easy to obtain, particularly when you're dealing with access issues. But keep in mind that as you're putting together your investigation, those are all things you should be thinking about in terms of your data collection to support what the condition is or what your potential conclusion is with regard to how a commingled plume is behaving. Other things to think about in terms of multiple lines of evidence are preferential pathways. These are things such as specific geologic conditions. There could be buried stream channels or other types of fracture embedding plane scenarios that could be influencing what's going on with flow and contaminant fate and transport. You need to make sure you're looking at those things carefully that can influence what the behavior of a commingled plume or any plume might be doing. Also look at your man-made conditions such as utilities, foundations, piles, things that again can influence what's going on with the shape and the behavior of a commingled plume. One of the things that is sort of I guess I would consider sort of a science, so to speak, is the whole concept of fate and transport modeling. We talk again in the guidance document quite a bit about how to use fate and transport modeling. And those types of models can range anywhere from very basic analytical models that can predict concentration behavior. There are reverse particle tracking models where you can sort of back calculate and try to figure out what a condition used to be before, that resulted in a commingled plume condition. There are other models that can be used to evaluate what the potential resolution options might be. And we'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentations about how you can do that to use these models to help facilitate a resolution. There are quite a few models that are in the public domain. We try to include those, a list of all those in Appendix F of the guidance document. And by all means, those are not the only ones that exist. There are a whole host of very expensive and sophisticated models, again, tailored to your site, whatever you think might be appropriate to justify the condition. There's a whole section in the guidance document that talks about statistical analysis and how statistical analysis can be used when dealing with a commingled plume situation. There are obviously statistical techniques, and you don't necessarily have to be a statistician to do these. Some of them you might want to have some background in statistics because they can get pretty complicated. Most commonly, those statistical models help address the uncertainty component with trying to predict what's going to happen, particularly in a commingled plume scenario. They can help to predict trends. They can help evaluate different sources, etc. There are geostatistical methods that can be used. Those are typically spatial distribution models. Again, that can help evaluate and look for patterns that may not be readily apparent when you're just looking, at a data table or a data figure. Stochastic analysis, those are basically probability analysis where they try to predict uncertainty in certain scenarios. Again, when things get very complicated and you're trying to use models to predict that, you can use this type of analysis to basically say, well, I think 95% of the time this is what I expect the outcome to be, or greater than 50% of the time I expect this is the outcome. Appendix B in the guidance document talks about all the examples of statistical analysis that we could come up with. Again, we try to tap into the ones that are the most commonly used, that people have experience with. This by no means is a list of all the statistical models that are available out there. Again, use whatever resource you think is appropriate to establish your multiple lines of evidence. Another good guidance document to tap into is the Monitored Natural Attenuation Guidance document. That document lists a whole host of statistical methods that can be used as part of your M&A strategy. A lot of those overlap or are very similar when you're dealing with a commingled plume scenario. Similarly, in the groundwater SIR/IRA technical guidance documents, there's additional discussion about statistical analysis. Another sort of science that exists out there with regard to dealing with the investigation of commingled plumes that can be very helpful are environmental forensics. This again is sort of an area of study that there's actually firms that specialize, that's all they do are these types of things. And again, they range in from very basic laboratory analysis to very complicated and very complex data analysis that can be done. And those, again, you can look at the historical chemical behavior to help to predict what the past or the future of this commingled plume scenario might be. It's typically used a lot, most commonly it's probably doing with age dating. Again, it's any of those of you that have been involved in any litigation that involved trying to evaluate what happened back in the day, trying to date a plume. That's environmental forensic techniques are pretty common in that area. It is an evolving science, and there's actually new things that come out all the time. We spend, in fact, one of the case studies talks quite a bit about one of those specific techniques that we'll get into later in the day. In Appendix C of the guidance document, we talk about, again, the most commonly identified or utilized forensic techniques. Some of those are specific to petroleum hydrocarbon, the fingerprinting and the piano analysis. There's degradation compound analysis that you can do beyond, strictly looking at the data that you generate from sort of a straight VOC analysis. There's trace compound additives. There's the compound-specific stable isotope analysis. That's one of the ones we talk about in the case study, where you basically look at the molecular level with some of these compounds to help identify whose is whose. Again, it can be a pretty complicated and pretty expensive approach to take, but oftentimes it can be a necessary line of evidence that you need to make your case. Similarly, there's biomarkers and weathering analysis. Those are most commonly used with petroleum forensics. Another model that we talk about is using the CSM. There's actually an existing guidance document that exists from the department about conceptual site models, and that's essentially can be a written or an illustrative depiction of the physical, chemical, and biological procedures that influence the transport, migration, and potential impacts to receptors. Again, trying to help explain a complex condition is oftentimes very helpful to use a CSM to do that. So take a look at the department's guidance document on that. I think we have a test question.
Yes, we do.
Very exciting.
Okay, open it up
So
for our
should I-
guys. Don't do anything. Oh, that's good.
Right?
Yep.
Don't
so
touch
far,
it.
so good. So
All right.
far, so good.
All right.
Okay.
Come on, I'm
So
gonna put
we're
this down.
open. Yep. Put the clicker
Step
down.
away.
Okay. All right. So the question, if you were awake the last 30 seconds, you will know the answer to this question. Okay. A conceptual site model is a written or illustrative description of the physical, chemical, biological processes that control the transport, migration, and potential impacts of contaminants to receptor. Is this true or false? Is it true or false? They are awake. That's wonderful. And we, I know, I was totally leading. So I'm afraid to talk to Rob. So we have another 30 seconds. We're going to talk to all around Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Putnam. Can you tell me, do you have any plans this summer?
Yes.
What?
I'm going to Delaware on vacation.
Ooh. I'll have to talk later. That's sad. All right. Do we have a...
Wow. Everybody's going to want to volunteer now.
I know.
So they can be humiliated
Make
by
fun of
Tessie.
make fun of your vacation
Lame
plans.
vacation.
Yeah. All right. How we doing? We done with a minute? 10 more seconds. See, I should have asked that question slower, more slowly. We're just about there. And they're going to close up. And we're going to have questions very soon. And so get ready. I guess click. There's true. Yes. All
Right.
those smiling faces said it was true.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Okay. Next.
All right.
I guess go on.
We're ready? All right. So a couple final lines of evidence that we talk about in the guidance document. Something known as high-resolution site characterization. There's actually a guidance document that exists on this. Typically, those things are somewhat dynamic types of field investigative strategies where you're doing focused data collection to refine your understanding either of lithology or contaminant distribution, often in 3 dimensions. Those things can be done with direct push tools using a membrane interface probe. There's some borehole geophysics that can be done. There's soil gas sampling techniques. You can use those in any combination of those various tools. Again, the idea is to gather additional information on your site characteristics to justify your condition with regard to a commingled plume condition and help predict what either happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. Like I mentioned, typically those are real-time data evaluation tools, and that way you can make adjustments in the field as you're collecting additional data to help hopefully inform your decision-making. So in the guidance document, there is a table, and it is a potential lines of evidence checklist. And the idea, it's a very busy table. If you looked at the guidance document, it's multiple pages. Again, the idea is to use this as a tool to help you keep track of various multiple lines of evidence that you're collecting to help formulate your opinion, to make sure you're not overlooking anything. Again, this is not designed to prove the negative and explain why you didn't use a particular line of evidence. It's really, again, a checklist. It's not a requirement. It is just a tool to assist LSRPs. It was actually, I don't know if we had it in the original guidance document or it was one of the things that people asked for, but people like checklists, so we included a checklist. So in summary, there are many options for developing multiple lines of evidence when you're dealing with a contaminated commingled plume. Multiple lines of evidence are useful in investigating, evaluating, and justifying your remedial strategies and your resolution mechanisms, as we'll hear about in a little bit. Again, not to stress this enough, the multiple lines of evidence in the guidance document are just examples. Use some of these or none of these. It's really up to you. The idea at the end of the day is that you've established, as the LSRP, sufficient evidence to support your conclusions. If you fail to do that, then when you make your submission, whatever it is, in the course of your key document submission or your permit application, you will probably get questions from the department. So the better you do with documenting your multiple lines of evidence, the better off you will be in these conditions. And it really is about utilizing professional judgment. We got a lot of comments about that. With the comments that people wanted to make sure that we are reiterating the importance of professional judgments by LSRPs when you're going through your lines of evidence and identifying what lines of evidence to use, how many to use, how to justify and explain. So that is the multiple lines of evidence section of the document.
Excellent. So go far because we have a question. We're open for questions webinar, and this gentleman has been holding on to that question for a while.
Thank you, Tess. First of all, I want to thank you for sticking it out and getting this guidance document completed. There are a number of us that were waiting a very long time and prompting every 6 months, where is it, where is it? I'm glad you got it done. And I think overall it's going to be very helpful for practitioners. The one thing in my read of this document was that struck me was that establishing physical flow relationships, among these plumes, these commingled plumes, really it didn't seem to me to be addressed appropriately in the guidance. It's mentioned as background data that you could collect. It's not really, there's no specific requirement or no hierarchy of requirements of multiple lines of evidence. Most of the guidance document seems to be focused on forensic chemistry and things of that nature, which is appropriate. But if you don't have the physical groundwater flow, the geologic setting and the groundwater flow defined sufficiently, then there's no point in doing any of the other stuff. So it seemed to me that one factor might have been a sort of, you have to have that before you do anything else. And I'd just like to get a sense of what your thoughts were as you were developing this guidance along those lines.
I think when we were coming up I think maybe we didn't reiterate it as best we should have, but the whole idea was this is stuff in addition to the regular, what you need for every case that you're evaluating, commingled plume or not. This was stuff in addition to the basics, which groundwater flow obviously is a critical piece. So I mean, we didn't stress that enough, but these are kind of, I think there's a section on if you're doing quote unquote a usual investigation that you need to do that, and this is stuff in addition to, they might need to do extra to help you make that determination.
Yeah, and I think your point is well taken. I mean, it is something that is more important probably than as your fundamental information that you need to be collecting. That's really going to influence all the decisions you ultimately make. So it's a good point.
Two comments. Picking up on what you just said, we try and find out if there's gaining streams and losing streams. Unless we talk to you, nobody else seems to get into it that much, just because the geology, like when you go to Pennsylvania, New York, it's a much bigger deal. But when we talk about it, it's like I said, unless we're talking to you, I think you should go further with what he said. That's my only comment, because we don't seem to have the same level of training in the state, like other states with a lot of rock and so on like that. So that's my comment. But to me, the gaining and losing stream is a big receptor thing a lot of the time. So that's just a general comment. Something Mark didn't mention, but I'll be very clear about this. Somehow we have a break with EPA sites that our surrounding states don't have. They don't go into the data miner. Nobody seems to read the EPA reports when they come out. CEAs are not placed. There's stuff times we find in residential neighborhoods. So when we get more money, somebody should do that. But other states, they formally comment on each thing coming out, and EPA go back and forth, and they go in the files. We just don't have that, and I think we should. It's just a general comment, because I come across commingled things once in a while, rarely by mistake, but when EPA is out in a neighborhood of a town in North Jersey and people are studying 4 or 5 other cases, and you can't find it, that's not a good thing. But that's just a comment, and I'm not saying, you know, it should get emphasis. That's my only point, because LSRPs don't pick up those sites if they're not being redeveloped. They just sort of sit in a black hole. That was my only comment.
And I do think I'm not 100% sure about this because I'm not a super fun expert, but I know there are some sites that the department will require a CEA to be mapped, but I don't know that that happens on every.
Well, no, they all should have one.
Yeah, they all should.
But your point is they don't.
Yeah.
So we just established a couple really big ones, so working on it.
Can you guys in the control room, can you highlight the bottom one? Maybe if you click, okay. The rest are not pertinent. No, it's like when is it going to start? Yeah, stuff like that. Okay. Trust me, I'm from the government. I am going to take this one first, and then we'll take you. Okay. Does the NJDEP unknown source site list? I can't read it. Site evaluation report. Oh, does it hold weight as a multiple line of evidence? I guess they're saying the unknown source report that looks like it was a
The department
2007. Does it hold any weight as one of the lines of evidence?
Well, I think in general, any information that's available for you to use, it may not be the only line of evidence you need to come in with, but there are some reports for unknown source investigations that we've done that are of public record. I'm not sure specifically what that report is referring to. Anything that's out there is public information. May not stand alone, but yeah, you can use it.
Okay.
Clearly, when we're talking about commingled plumes, we're going to be talking about at least one gasoline plume. Has the committee identified any commercial laboratories that are willing to fingerprint gasoline contaminants?
Actually, John Ingdahl has a lot of history with the petroleum industry, both working with the petroleum clients and in the consulting background. He actually brought a number of things to the table. We didn't come up with any, nor did we necessarily want to endorse a specific laboratory. I think the department's very careful about not doing that sort of thing. And I think the petroleum forensics is also something that is continuing to evolve. There's actually I think a 1 or 2 day course that I think tours around the country that makes a stop in New Jersey, and they spend almost a whole day talking about petroleum forensics and what those opportunities are to do that. But it is something that's not perfect at this point. It's apparently very difficult to do.
Any other questions before our next speaker? We're going to have one more speaker and then a break, and then a short break.
This is why she runs it. This is why she runs it.
Yes, exactly. Okay. This thing does not like me. No.
Can you forward a slide? Well, too much, right? Is it just...
Yes. Okay, we're good. Okay. So we've done gathered all your lines of evidence. You've made the determination that there is a commingled plume condition. So now what do you do? The committee, we had a long conversation with management here as well, because this is a technical guidance document. So we went through all the tools, and then I think we made the determination that really a lot of what people, the answers that to the questions that people really want are, so what? What do I have to do to move forward with the process? How can I get out and issue my RAO? So a large portion of the guidance document, it's kind of evolved to discuss some of these things. Okay. The objectives for, actually grab the wrong slides. Okay, some of the objectives of trying to come up with a resolution mechanism allow the remedial activities to move forward, and ensuring that some of the mandatory and regulatory timeframes are not missed, protecting receptors, also moving forward to avoid potential litigation between parties, potentially reduce remediation costs, time or cost if you're working together, and input into planning remedial actions to address the releases. There's a few overarching one of the overarching things that we'll discuss through the resolution mechanism is the whole idea of using the multiple lines of evidence is to determine which contamination is yours, and trying to differentiate, this is mine, this is the other guy's. So all of these resolution mechanisms are basically, you've already made that determination, and this is how you move forward with the information that you have. Okay, and until you can determine which molecule is whose, you're still got the joint and several liability, so you're on the hook until you can make that differentiation. Sometimes you can do that, and that's great, and to be honest with you, sometimes there's just going to be situations where you cannot make that determination, and so you are responsible for the remediation until you prove otherwise. Some things that you still need to address, and I know we have comments about the time frames and meeting the required time frames and sending the information into the department, but certain things need to be done quickly and regardless of the fact that there's a commingled plume. A lot of these are related to IEC and receptor conditions, obviously. You need to still identify all your potential receptors. You have to evaluate the mitigation, or you have to mitigate any impacted or imminently threatened receptors. That would be the IEC conditions, either VI or potable water impacts. And you need to control ongoing sources and implement IRMs, including free product, per the free product LNAPL guidance document. So you have to do those regardless. All right, we broke this out in coming up with a resolution mechanism for your site. Basically three ways. Either there's tools you can use when you're working cooperatively with the other responsible party, or you can, if they're not giving you the time of day, or there's some circumstances where you've got a whole lot of contamination and there's a little bit maybe commingling and it's just easier and not worth the aggravation to just do it yourself. And also, the third type is if you're dealing with somebody who just doesn't want to have any parts of the remediation, and it's just like, oh, none of this is mine, it's all yours. So that's how we broke it down. The first thing is working cooperatively. Throughout the guidance document, I think we referenced that the department's preference, if possible, is to work as a group. I know there are certain circumstances. I've worked on a few like service stations through the Relic program that people were using back in the day. And that really it just makes life a whole lot easier if everybody's coordinating it together. And a lot of times that's just not optimal, maybe at the beginning, but even if you can break down some of the investigation into smaller pieces where you're working together, sometimes that can help as well. Some of the benefits, hopefully you can move, once you've agreed, you can move the remediation through faster. You're not fighting with people anymore. Usually it's more efficient. There's one set of wells going in instead of, party A putting in them, and then party 2 putting them in, trying to get access to either of them. So sometimes that helps. Also, off-site access. you can eliminate some of that if there are people, you know, if you need to get on each other's site. Some of the challenges with trying to do that are trying to, you know, figure out who's paying for what and the cost allocation. Completeness of, like you've determined that there's a commingled plume, and the completeness of investigation. Party A is almost done with their remedial investigation. Party B hasn't even started. So how do you get them onto the, you know, onto the same page? Another challenge can sometimes be the goal at the end. This person, you know, is looking for a residential development. This person over here is doing non-res, and sometimes there's a conflict of what the objective and the goals are. A lot of times we see that with active versus M&A. You know, active might be quicker. The other party's like, we'll do M&A. It'll take a little longer, but that's what we want to do. Okay, working independently. Depending on the scope of the situation, this may be the easiest path forward. As I mentioned before, a large plume and the small bits of chlorinated or TC or BTEX is encroaching onto your TCE plume. If you're, it may not necessarily be of issue. It might just be easier to deal with it by yourself. Some of the benefits of this are basically the scope of the remedy is what you or the your party or the LSRP feels is appropriate. Timing, you don't have to wait on anyone else. You can just, you know, go forward and on your, you know, on your merry little way. Some of the challenges are, though, you're paying for the whole thing. You know, so, and if that's not an issue and timing or moving forward is more important, that may not be a problem. Also, perceived liability. This came up, if you're cleaning up somebody's mess, somebody may be thinking, oh, well, you're cleaning it, it must be yours. So that's something else to take a look at. Working with an uncooperative PRCR. There are some tools that are outlined in the guidance document that we threw out there, mechanisms you can try to use. One is a neutral party technical mediation, and related to that obviously is technical third-party neutral technical arbitration. You can use outside agencies to do that. The LSRPA, as Mark was talking about, now has a, you know, if you're a member, you can come in and they have a dispute resolution group. You might want to try that. There's all kinds of other mediation and arbitration groups and things out there, not some of them not necessarily involving an LSRP. Two responsible parties can do that without LSRPs. Can also seek triple damages if you have enough information to show that you've been damaged, or you're paying for a remediation, you want to go after the cost for the other guy. That's outlined. How you do that and get that authority from us is outlined in the guidance document. And the last thing is up here is litigation. You know, we sue the guy if they're not doing what you want. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, it's just some things. These are more what I consider more outside things you can do outside the department. There are also the Office of Dispute Resolution at the DEP will they will only work on disputes between DEP and a responsible party, but sometimes that may be helpful. This will not address disagreements or issues between LSRPs, but it's out there. There are some facilities and some cases, I think, that have gone through this process. That's more to line up what we are requiring, but it is out there. And also technical consultations. That's where an LSRP and a responsible party can, you know, come in to discuss technical concerns. This will not, and since I'm the one that gets all these, I will not be addressing disagreements between LSRPs. You ask me, I will send you to Sue Boyle, because that is not our responsibility and that is not what we do. Okay. Great.
It doesn't say that that we'll take questions now, but I guess we could.
We could.
If anybody has.
I mean, this is all pretty much a general overview of things.
I have a couple questions, mostly related to liability. Under resolution mechanisms, you mentioned identification of all potential receptors. Could you talk for a minute about, and a lot of my questions, I guess, all relate to one thing, and that is if I've done for my client what I believe needs to be done, and I've demonstrated that going further with off-site contamination is ultimately someone else's problem. If they're recalcitrant, are you suggesting that we need to continue doing the other party's work? Because if that's in fact the case, I can guarantee you that in many instances, lawyers and litigation are going to put us in a hard stop, and I'm trying to resolve where the guidance wants to take us with what reality is out in the field.
A lot of what Mike Infanger will be talking about is calling the hotline, issuing RAOs for off-site stuff, but that's what a lot of his information kind of does is you find this, you've made a determination that it's not yours, what do I do next? And he will be going through that, I think, administrative-wise. Do you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add to it because I can appreciate the comment for sure. And I think when we were looking at the guidance document, the way I would look at it is sort of where are you in the process? And if you are sort of in the initial stages of the process and you don't feel you have sufficient lines of evidence to make that conclusion that this part of the plume is not yours, I think you need, the department's going to encourage you to, do what you need to do to protect receptors during that uncertainty period. Once you're at a point where you've made that determination, it may be a scenario where, because if there are potential receptors that are going to be impacted or could be impacted, you may want to reach out to the department and sort of make sure it's clear. And maybe there's some sort of document you may want to submit. I don't know. It's going to be really case specific. But once you're at that point, I think Mary Ann's was saying, then you're off the hook. You've demonstrated what you need to demonstrate. It's really during that uncertainty period where we wanted to stress, you may have to take care of something that ultimately may not end up being your responsibility, but in the interest of protecting receptors during that interim phase, you should be doing that.
And is there an administrative process we need to follow just to Mark's point?
I would say it's probably, key document submittal. That's where you would do those, establish that line in the sand that you're taking that position.
Okay, and that would be in an RAO determination or?
Well, we're going to get to that. So when we talk about, there's a whole bunch of scenarios that we sort of came up with that you may find yourself in, and what do I do to get out? That's what we'll.
How about one more question, and then we'll take a break.
Just a follow-on and a related question. In a situation where you have significant reason to believe that you have contamination from an off-site source not related to your site, but you're not 100% there yet, you don't have a slam dunk argument there, what are the implications with respect to timelines and timeframes, particularly with respect to if you have a potential impact to a receptor? In other words, do you have to abide by all the time frames in a situation where you are not certain that the contamination you're dealing with is your contamination?
Yes, you're to be held to those time frames. I know with some of the IEC, you need to contact the IEC group if sometimes there's a little wiggle room in that regard, but in general, you need to meet the time frames. That was what I was saying at the beginning of my talk. Is I know people are going to say, well, I only have 45 days to do this. How am I going to do it? Unfortunately, until you show it's not you, you're kind of on the hook for the time frames.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're a little ahead of schedule, so let's come back at about 10 of 3. coming up is a very snappily dressed Michael Imfanger, and he's going to talk about some administrative requirements. Michael. Let's give him a round of applause.
Oh, yes. Well, if I can, give me applause for learning how to use the clicker.
Oh,
Yeah.
what's going on? Why don't we have this? Oh, is it a button to push? I guess we should have gotten that together before. Let's see. Oh, you're going to have to just do with your hands and stuff.
Yeah.
I pressed every single button. And, oh wait, it says to display,
Press the question mark button.
No, that's that one. Ooh,
Okay, break.
Yay!
Okay.
That's what I do at home. I'm like, I don't know, I'm pressing every button. Now I can't make it go forward? Does it have to warm up? Can you put the next slide up, please? And we'll see if it works. So it should be this one.
Okay. As I'm talking about section 5, I like to call it how to get the commingled plume through the system because it sounds better than administrative requirements. Okay. We're going to talk about situations when commingling contamination is found before the remedial action permit is issued. And, that's probably most of the cases. We will consider finding the contamination. We'll consider scenarios, finding contamination off-site versus finding it on-site. And we will approach how to establish a classification area in these situations. Okay. We will also talk about finding the commingling contamination after the remedial action permit, and perhaps the RAO's already been issued. And also there are new notices for response action outcome for these situations. Okay, now each of these scenarios will involve a call to the hotline. So each section has an enumerated paragraph of the steps to take in calling the hotline. The sections in each scenario look the same, but they're not. And particularly, we want you to note that there is an item number 4 that has verbatim language we want you to tell the hotline operator, whether they want to hear it or not. Yes. And the language is different for each scenario. And also should be noted that in one scenario, the call to the hotline is not immediate. Okay, so the commingled plume scenarios we're looking at are overprinting. So the separate discharge is detected on site and the source is on site. Also, the separate discharge could be detected on site, but the contaminants are actually coming from off site. Also, you might be delineating down gradients, and you might find different contamination down site, or you could find similar contamination down gradient. Okay, scenario 1, section 5.1 in the guidance is the overprinting scenario. Again, it will involve a call to the hotline, according to use the language in the enumerated section, and you will submit a confirmed discharge notification. Okay, within 14 days of the hotline call. Oh, and I have to mention at this point, somehow we got a little processing error, and we called it 45 days in the guidance document, but we are trying to get that fixed. Okay, the scenario 2 is when we find the contamination, the commingling contamination on site, but the contaminants are coming from off site, and presumably we can document that. And so again, we make a hotline call. We submit the CDN within 14 days. Okay, this is section 5.2. Okay, scenario three is when you're downgrading, you're perhaps delineating. You're downgrading and you find different contamination, different dissimilar contaminants than you're looking for. Okay, again, you will make a hotline call, and you will then complete your investigation. Okay, in this scenario, there will be no confirmed discharge notification. Well, at least, you will not be doing that. And there will be no RAO notice. Okay, and it should be emphasized, it's important to use the hotline language we give you, because the last thing you want is for you to write your RAO and us to say, hey, wait a minute, what about that number you had over there? We want to separate that number from your case. And we decided to put the downgrading scenarios in one section. So this is 5.3.1. Okay, not to be confused with 5.3.2. Okay, when we find similar contaminants, downgradients, okay, again, you will complete your investigation and you will make a hotline call. Okay, again, there will be no confirmed discharge notification, and you will not put this in your, or you will not put this number in your RAO. And this is a case where if there's similar contamination, if there's similar contaminants, you might not know right away that this is not related to your discharge, the discharge you're investigating. So it may take you a while to compile the multiple lines of evidence you need to say, yes, this is somebody else's tank field or something. It might take you a while to find that. So this is a situation in which your hotline call is not immediate. Okay, we're accustomed to, within 15 minutes, better call the hotline. But you don't really know that it's a different discharge, until you compile your lines of evidence. Okay, now everyone's familiar with RI deadlines, so you know that eventually you're going to want to write. You're going to want to establish a classification exception area. Okay. Okay, and so there are some considerations for this situation, the contaminated plume situation. Okay, wherever possible, we want you to model the individual contributions to the plume using your modeling forensics or other lines of evidence. Try to say this, try to ignore the other ones, and this would be my plume if everything had gone right. Okay. Now, it could be that that's not possible. Okay. So when the commingled plumes cannot be differentiated, you will put the entire plume. You'll draw the entire plume. Even though you know that your discharge is not responsible for the entire plume, you'll need to put in your report that you chose these boundaries because you could not differentiate the plumes. Okay.
All right, here we are again. So we're going to open up the question to the webinar folks. And just to reiterate, we're doing this in order for the webinar participants to be able to get credit for these. And this is going to be a very difficult question, so hang on. When commingled plumes cannot be differentiated, include the entire plume when developing a classification exception area. And I want a show of hands. Is that true or false? Somebody in the back fooling around. Okay. So it looks like we have another 30 seconds. Who can I bother? Ira, how are you? What are you going to be doing this summer?
going to maritime provinces of Canada.
That sounds like more fun than Delaware. I think, is that it? No, we need, oh no, I should have drawn it out more. I'm actually going to Vancouver and Vancouver Island. And same as Neil Rivers is doing the same thing. No, I don't think so. It's like, watch, we're going to see each other at a restaurant or something. I don't know. 5 more seconds. And then Mike is going to continue. He's doing a bang-up job, don't you think? Yep, super. All right,
Okay.
click.
Do the click.
Click.
All right.
And the answer was true, and you are going to continue.
All right.
There you go.
Okay. We also want to continue, we want to consider situations in which you already have the permit and perhaps the RAO, and then you encounter the commingling contamination. Okay. Now we call these, we identify these situations as A, B, C, and D, mostly to not confuse them with scenarios 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay. There is a table 2 in the guidance. Table 1 is the checklist, the multiple lines of evidence checklist. Table 2 is the post remedial action permit decision tree. Okay, and it looks like this, except in the guidance document it's expanded and much more detailed. And at this juncture, I also have to mention that there's an imprecise use of words in the table. We use the phrase "cannot sample." Okay, and and the context is if you cannot sample, then request a permit abeyance. But you obviously you can sample. It sounded, I guess a lot of people thought it sounded like we were telling you can sample, but as we'll see, we're actually giving you more latitude about sampling. Okay, and I think we'll try to fix that one too. Okay. Okay, scenario A is when you have your permit, you encounter the other contamination, but it has minimal impact on your existing remediation. Okay, it could be that you're remediating BTEX and all of a sudden you get some PCE. But if the levels are low, maybe they don't affect your detection levels or anything, so you can just go on your merry way. No permit, no remedial action permit modification is necessary. Just continue on your path. Okay, now scenario B is when you encounter the contamination and it does have an impact on your remediation. Okay, and we're calling it scenario B when you are able to come up with a revised monitoring plan and you can get a permit modification that will keep the permit in compliance. Okay, now the next scenarios involve what we call remedial action permit abeyance. Okay, and we thought we'd better have a special slide on that before going further. What is an abeyance? We decided to even put it, right in the middle so everybody would see it. Okay. An abeyance puts the monitoring plan of the permit on hold. You still have a permit, but we're not holding you to the provisions of the monitoring plan. Permits are very inflexible. They says here are the wells you sample. These are your parameters. On this schedule. If you're not doing that, you're not doing what's in the permit. So. If you're not able to continue on that monitoring plan, we call that a remedial action permit abeyance. Okay, so when you encounter your contamination and you really think, my monitoring plan's out the window here, with your next biennial certification, you will provide a justification based on professional judgment of, why your monitoring plan is no longer viable. And then you will propose an appropriate course of action. And it is subject to department written approval. Okay, that is, you're going to get a letter in reply. We call it an abeyance letter. Okay, so again, because permits are inflexible, you might say, well, my source well's fine, my middle wells, my fringe wells are no good, but hey, that well over there looks good, but it's not my permit. Where with the abeyance in effect, you have more latitude to modify your investigation and your monitoring. Okay, and now scenario C is when you have the new discharge affecting your remediation, and you determine sampling will not allow for the differentiation of the impact from the new discharge. Again, and in this scenario, we're going to consider the situation where you do have multiple lines of evidence to separate out your discharge from the other discharge. You may have to take other factors into account. Maybe the new discharge is affecting your degradation rates, or maybe it's co-solving your contaminants and increasing the spatial, the distance. Okay. Whatever it is, figure it out and, propose and say, I have been able to figure out how to extrapolate my remediation. Okay, so in these cases, you would request the groundwater remedial action permit abeyance. You would continue, you still have a permit, you'll still pay your permit fees, submit your biennial certifications, and then, yes, so you develop the lines of evidence to extrapolate when your initial plume would have met applicable standards. Okay, and that's your goal. You want to reach that point where you can say, everything went according to my plan, so I can terminate my permit. Okay, you might not be so lucky. You might be in scenario D, and that's where the new discharge, again, it significantly affects your remediation, and sampling won't allow for differentiation of the plumes, but you don't have your multiple lines of evidence. Maybe things weren't going so well in your permit, and your levels were bouncing around, so you can't extrapolate when the end of your CEA is. Okay, once again, you will request the remedial action permit abeyance. And again, you'll continue to pay the fees, submit the biennial certifications, and in many cases, you'll have to wait till the remediation of that other discharge is completed before you can go in and say, okay, well, how's my discharge doing? Okay, now we also have remedial action outcome notices for the commingled plume situations. Okay. In one case, we're going to use an existing RAO notice for the situation in which you have dissimilar contaminants that are coming onto your site and commingling with your plume. You will still use the contamination remains on site due to off-site contamination notice. That's I think that's in the model document. So you're probably already familiar with that. Okay, but we also have new notices for the RAO. Okay, one situation, when you have similar constituents, on site and it's an off-site source, Or you could have different constituents. Again, multiple on-site discharges. So you have different contaminants, but they're coming from your site. Or the more complicated situation in which you have similar constituents also coming from your site. These are new notices. They are in the guidance document. They're not yet available on the on the forms page. Okay, so for the time being, if you want to use the notices, you'll have to cut and paste from the guidance document. Also, the RAO guidance document is not due for revision. I think that just came out last year. So that won't be revised in the near future to include the new notices. But I have been told that there will be a listserv about the new notices, and that should be coming out in about a month. Okay. How about
Okay, we can take some questions about Mike's topic or any topic that has happened. They're starting to settle down. Do you notice that? They're getting a little. Okay, hold on. We have a question here.
I don't mean to be a pain in the neck about this, but I have a site. This has changed 3 times. Who is the lead? The permit writer or Marianne? No, 3. I've been inspected at a site 3 times. What I'm supposed to do to make the permit match the background it's changed 3 times. You guys tell me what I'm supposed to do. Who is the lead person for guidance? I'm serious. If it's a permit.
Then you would. If it's a permit, then you would call the permitting group. If it's a permit issue, yes. In fact, right. If you have a permit and you're trying to, work with someone to get the monitoring plan, it would be your permit writer.
I'll give you a specific scenario and then I'll drop it. Okay. But the inspection's done. I get tagged for not doing background, which is fine. I said I'll do it. So then I go through another inspection and there's a different comment. When I finally come to the permit writer, he says you don't have to do it. There has to be one answer somewhere. There had to do with the different types of these scenarios you're talking about. You guys don't agree with each other. I mean, I'm not trying to be wise. I'm just saying if the permit writer makes a final decision, I shouldn't have gone through a process and the permit writer says you don't need to do it. But I get these things sometimes. That's all I'm saying.
Hold on.
Yeah.
When you have a permit, so that's when you would contact Mike's folks. If there's, if you got concerns about something that was in the Bureau of Inspection and Reviews, obviously you need to contact them. Once your permit's been issued or you've applied for your permit, then you should be talking to Mike. And if there's a disconnect, this guidance, we pretty much just finalized it in the last month. So, if it was a while ago, that's possible. But, if you have a specific concern, just reach out to the people that, 1, inspected it, or 2, if it's a permit.
The reason I'm asking, I'll stop it, I've given 3 different names. I consulted with 3 different people. And the final answer was wrong. So that's what I was asking.
Okay, well.
All right. Well, we'll work to, new guidance, and we'll work to fix that. All right. Because these things up on the web are so hard to read. Hold on one second. Okay, so I was given a laptop here. I can read them from a laptop. All right, a former SRP assistant commissioner said that if the person responsible or other person is not cooperating and the remediation is not proceeding properly, the department would intercede and bang a few heads together. That's adorable. Who said that?
Let's name some names.
And though it will make things happen. Sounds good if there's a commingled plume and my client is doing the right thing, but the other party is not cooperating. Would the department intercede? Marianne, I think you answered this already. Why don't you answer it again?
The resolution mechanisms.
That's right.
I think as far as departmental intercession, I think that would be the Spill Act directive. Where, in which case, if you apply to us and say, look, I've got an ironclad case here, issue a Spill Act directive, issue the Spill Act directive to me and that other guy, and if he doesn't cooperate, I take him to court for triple damages.
Not you, but
Well,
that
yeah.
person,
Well,
that
yeah,
party
right.
should, right? Okay, next question is, we recently called in an off-site source to the hotline, and when we gave the operator the prescribed language in the off-site source guide, the operator had no idea what we were talking about.
Right, yeah.
Have the hotline operators been trained in this specific language for commingled plumes? They have?
Okay.
The people on the webinar can't hear
Yeah,
you
I
if
don't
we're
know
not
if,
on the microphone.
Yes.
What I was going to say, I'm Christina Page, is I was on the Commingled Plume, I'm sorry, I was on this committee and I was on the Offsite Source Committee as well. So for the Offsite Source guidance document, I know that the operators at the Hotline Center were trained. However, I believe they still need to be trained for the Commingled Plume guidance.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to continue on because this is such a pain in the neck. I'm going to continue on with the web questions, and then we'll come back to the people in the room. The next question is, does not the scenario 2 guidance conflict with the off-site source guidance that does not require a CDN for upgrade off-site source? Yikes. Does scenario 2, does it conflict with off-site source guidance? I guess they're saying the off-site source guidance does not require a CDN for upgradient off-site sources. Is that true?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Do I need to say it again?
Okay, yeah.
All right. We're talking about scenario 2 here.
Okay.
Does it conflict with the off-site source guidance that doesn't require a CDN for upgradient off-site sources? It's a little hard to follow.
Okay. Well, one, they're not the same because
They're
this
not.
is if it's commingling. Yeah, if it's commingling, then you use the commingled plume guidance. Yes. Right, where in the there's no commingling with the off-site source guidance.
Okay. All right, and I guess if you had any, contact the committee if you want more detail on that directly via email. Okay, the next question is, hey, what's wrong with Delaware? They've got great beaches.
Yes, okay.
Okay. That's true. That's not a question. Okay. I'll make sure I word my questions, make my statements more carefully in the future, not to offend any particular state. Okay. We recently called in an off-site source to the hotline. We did that one. While waiting for NJDEP written response for a groundwater RAP abeyance, does the groundwater sampling frequency included in the RAP need to be maintained? They're asking for an abeyance. They haven't gotten it yet. Do they still have to sample according with their permit?
Okay, well, usually a permit sampling schedule is on the order of every year or two. So if you haven't heard something in a year, then there's something wrong. So, yeah, I would say yes. It would probably mean that it's still, yes.
Yeah.
Well, right.
The timing is important
Yeah.
for when you submit an abeyance, a request for an abeyance. Okay, anybody in the room?
Okay, go back to the room.
So any big questions? Any more about Delaware? Nothing? Nothing? Okay, why don't we let that go? And we now are going to be moving on to a couple of fascinating case study scenarios. Let's give Mike a round of applause.
I did not get the snappy dresser thing. I didn't know.
Go forward one and make sure you're on. It would be, I think
Which one?
This one? There we go.
Inherently, okay. Good afternoon. So, as you've heard so far, this guidance document offers a lot of options to deal with commingled plumes. We've heard of some new concepts, some resolution strategies, technical administrative tools. So next part of this training is to go through a couple of case studies. I'm going to talk about one. You have to excuse me, I'm dying of allergies. Marianne's going to talk a couple others. And the purpose of the case studies is to try to wrap all this together, see how kind of the pieces all fall in place. At least that's the intent. So just an overview of this first case study. This involves an overprinting scenario at a retail gas station. That's why I'm having a hard time, sorry. It's a former large corporate owner, we call it ABC Retail, and they had completed a remediation for a discharge in 1996. They selected monitored natural attenuation, they got their remedial action permit, they were in a remedial happy place. In 2010, they sold to an independent operator, we call XYZ Retail. So during routine monitoring by ABC Retail, they noticed a spike, significant spike in BTEX, which appeared to be new. Again, this is sort of an overprinting scenario where it's the same constituents, sort of spatially similar but temporally different. So I'm going to go a little bit into some more background on this particular case, go over the tools used to determine that it was a new release, discuss some of the resolution strategies selected, and go through administrative resolutions, which ultimately were used to close the case. So as I said, back in 1996, ABC Retail reported a discharge or had a discharge that was associated with the piping system. They reported the discharge. They started with their SIRI. They completed a significant amount of soil excavation. They completed some LNAPL recovery. Based on the SRRI, they didn't have any off-site soil investigations, and no other receptors were identified. They installed a series of monitoring wells, monitoring well network. I know that's hard to see, but groundwater is generally to the northwest. They installed 2 source wells, A and B, down on the lower right. That's associated with the piping area. Installed 2 plume wells, C and D. That was in the source area. In the plume area, down gradient of the source area. And then they installed 1 off-site sentinel well, monitoring well E, all the way in that direction, which was down gradient of the plume wells. Between 1996 and 2010, BTEX in the source area generally decreased to below groundwater quality standards. The wells in the plume range from non-detected 20,000 ppb in this general time frame, but overall the concentrations exhibited sort of a decreasing trend within this network. LNAPL recovery ceased in 2008. This is all ABC Retail. They initiated groundwater quality monitoring. The BTEX in Sentinel well E consistently was below groundwater quality standards. Subsequently, ABC Retail ceased operations in 2010. So this is just a graph of one of the wells in the source area, monitoring well B. Original date of the release, 1996. ABC Retail ceased in 2010, and you can see sort of a nice decreasing trend. As I said, based on the previous data, ABC selected an M&A remedy, and they received a remedial action permit for groundwater. They issued a limited restricted use RAO for the 1996 case, So at this point, right, we're done and done. They subsequently sold the facility to XYZ Retail, who began operations in late 2010, and even post-sale, so they sold in 2010 to about 2014, there continued a decreasing trend while doing the RAP monitoring for those 4 years. Between 2015 and present, MWB, one of the original source wells, the BTEX concentrations increased by an order of magnitude. The Plume area wells, C and D, same thing, concentrations increased by an order of magnitude. One of the source wells, A, as well as the Sentinel well, E, either remained the same or were below groundwater quality standards. So, as was mentioned before, even though ABC Retail thought this was a new discharge, they were still obligated to make sure that no new receptors were identified. There was no LNAPL, no off-site monitoring wells. So until they kind of collected their proof, they were responsible for making sure there was no other receptors. So just to get back to the graph, 96, original date of release, 2010, ABC ceases operations, XYZ starts operations, and then 2015, the concentrations go through the roof. So, like I said, ABC suspected that this was a new release. So some of the tools that they used to build their case was to revisit the conceptual site model, clearly reviewed the operational history and timelines. They used statistical trend analyses to confirm that they had decreasing trends. And they used fate and transport modeling, in this case fairly simple. They used bioscreen to calculate their CEA endpoint. So the multiple lines of evidence used, again, to build their case, A was operational history. They had 16 years of data while they were operating and 4 years of post-operational data, confirming that there was a decreasing trend. They also documented the effectiveness, which is now back in 98, effectiveness of their source removal. So they were confident that they basically got everything from previous LNAPL and soil excavation. Again, the trend analysis confirmed M&A during that monitoring period. And another line of evidence is the fact that there's suddenly a significant increase in BTEX. So based on that, those lines of evidence, ABC Retail concluded that A, they had new discharge, and B, that they would have met the groundwater quality standards 7 years from the point of XYZ's discharge. So again, original date of release, cease operations, new release, and I think it's 2022 was the calculated CEA endpoint. So again, the multiple lines of evidence established that they had an overprinting commingled plume condition. ABC, as part of the resolution strategy, decided to work cooperatively with XYZ Retail. As you recall, there were other methods, suing, going along on your own. They chose to work cooperatively. XYZ Retail doesn't agree with ABC. I know, I was shocked too. With ABC Retail conclusions and refuses to work cooperatively. Ultimately, XYZ Retail goes defunct. Now what do you do? So as part of administrative resolution, sort of the old paradigm, basically ABC Retail would have likely taken on the burden of the new release. I was going to use the word SOL, but you have to spell out the acronyms, so I didn't. I didn't do that. Likely live out the life of that second release, which is probably another 20 years. And from ABC's perspective, this site kind of goes nowhere. Sort of under the new paradigm, basically ABC, after they had completed their multiple lines of evidence to prove that it was a new discharge, would have called, well, I guess in this case would have called the hotline immediately, right? in accordance with Section 5.1. Again, they confirm with multiple lines of evidence, confirm that there's no new receptors, submitted a CDN and notify a property owner. Even though XYZ is out of business, there is a property owner in this particular case. Because 3 out of the 5 wells were affected, they no longer could comply with their permit. So they had to modify, or they would modify their permit to only include those 2 unaffected wells. So then when you get new permit, you're only going to be responsible for those 2 wells, not those 3 other wells that you got impacted by the new discharge. So assuming after 7 years, as calculated by the CEA, assuming after 7 years that MWA and E, the 2 unaffected wells, attenuated as predicted, or some other time, maybe it's 8 years, 9 years, but whatever that is, for just those 2 wells, you could terminate your permit after that period of time. And again, the point here is that ABC Retail, based on their modified permit, were now only responsible meeting groundwater quality standards in 2 instead of the 5 wells. So at this point then, once compliance is achieved in those 2 unaffected wells, ABC could issue an unrestricted RAO, which could be issued with the commingled plume notice, similar constituents, multiple on-site discharges. And this is, Mike went through, this is scenario B on table 2. If similar to this situation, let's just go back for a second and assume that all the wells were knocked out by the new discharge, that would be scenario C. So in that case, you would put your permit into abeyance, right? Because now you can't monitor any of the wells. You would put your permit into abeyance and then complete biennial certifications and then terminate your permit after your projected 7-year time frame. That's it.
Okay, so we have another case scenario. Thank you, Michael. Let's give him a round of applause. Here we go. There are very few times when you can actually, we're not going to take questions yet, very few times when you go to work and you actually get a round of applause, so we might as well and do that when we can. All right, so you're going to explain why you are here.
Yes, I am going to explain why I'm here.
One slide. And right after this, we will have all the rest of the questions for the case scenarios and anything else, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. All right. You guys are lucky enough to hear me for a 3rd time today. Lisa Voice was supposed to be giving this talk, but she had a foot injury and was not able to make it in. So, and it's unfortunate because she has actually used CSIA, some of the CSIA techniques in her casework. So I'm going to do my best. You may not get a whole lot of answers to your questions, but I'm going to go through her information for these case studies. The first thing I'm going to do is go through a little bit of what the compound-specific isotope analysis, or CSIA, does or can do, or what it is, because we do reference that a fair amount, because it is a new tool. As Mark said, it's an ever-expanding science for different things that are coming out. Specifically, the CSIA is something that works, this technique works best for chlorinateds. It's a geochemistry-based technology. It measures the stable isotopes of carbon, hydrogen, and chlorine in contaminants to determine chemical or if there's been any chemical or biochemical reactions or degradation. It analyzes the abundance of stable isotopes and shifts in the isotope ratios to help identify contaminant sources. For chlorinated compounds in particular, if you have a source of PCE or TCE, that ratio will stay the same throughout the degradation process. And so you can look at the shifts in the ratios to determine, really what's going on, or which PCEs from which site. it also, and this is an analogy that Lisa came up with. It's not a DNA, in criminal cases. A PCE, TCE source, a source will have similar characteristics like a DNA. It's not necessarily a one-on-one match, but that was an example she was using to try to explain how this works at the beginning. You obviously need multiple lines of evidence, just not this chemical specific information. You also obviously need to have an idea you obviously have had it on site characterization. If you want to use bioremediation as one of your indicators, you have to have all those other indicators too. The geochemical indicators, the biologic indicators, and you still have to have all that stuff. And you still have to have, you still are required to monitor the effectiveness of your remediation. CSIA is an accepted science for both source identification, trying to figure out where a source is coming from, and also if you have enough information you can apportion, okay, this percentage is this percentage belongs to that, and you can figure out who is responsible for what. The ITRC has several guidance documents under the Environmental Molecular Diagnostic page. CSIA is just one of the techniques that's listed there. I have a copy of the fact sheet for the CSIA. It gives a real good, basic and relatively some quick information, so you get a general idea of what's going on and what we're talking about it. And like I said, CSIA is just one of the list of forensic tools they have fact sheets and information for. Okay, I'm going to go through some basic case studies, and these are based on, they're a little simplified for the purposes of this discussion and for the guidance document, but actually these are two sites that Lisa had used the CSIA techniques to figure out what's going on. The first case study, and these are the ones case study 4 in the guidance document, it's a commercial area. There were many possible off-site sources where VOCs were coming from. There was obviously a large amount of work done in a big evaluation, 74 monitoring wells, and also included 100 screening points. I think they did a lot of MIPS out there. What made it complicated is the shallow groundwater is clean, and the deep is dirty. So they're tried to go out there to try to figure out where it was coming from, and it was very difficult to do that because there wasn't any shallow contamination. CSIA was one of the tools used, she said, along with a good PA and a good local history to try to figure out what's going on. Does this have a pointer on it?
It does at the top, but remember that the people on the web.
Yeah, I know.
Won't.
Okay. Okay. Oh, they're going to, okay. All right, this is just an air photo with some of the contaminant levels that were found. The way this is, the top one is PCE, the middle one is TCE, and then the bottom level, and this is concentration, the bottom one is the DCE. Okay. I want to apologize for the people on the web. I was going through this presentation and there was no way I was going to be able to describe what the issue is, so I added this morning to the presentation. I think everybody got a handout here.
We can make sure the web folks get it as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, oh, it's in the document
Yes,
as well.
it is in the guidance document. I pulled it out of the document, page 65 in the document.
Page 65.
I just wanted to put it up here for my explanation purposes. All right, so they did a lot of isotope ratio signatures and evaluation at the site. I'm just going. How did you put that on?
That green button in the top of it.
Oh, this? Yeah. Ah, that would make sense. It's green. Okay. So along the top here are the different ratios. On the top here, it's carbon 13 and carbon 12. This one is chlorine 37, and the ratio is 37 to chlorine 35. And the one over here is hydrogen 1 to hydrogen 2. And the numbers aren't absolute. When you look at them, you have to see how they match, or how they match up, I should say. So, and what the evaluation with all these numbers, I'm just going to point out some things that you could see. Here's the level of PCE, this combination right here. As you notice, they're all pretty similar throughout the area that was evaluated. And a signature like this pretty much shows that there's only one source of PCE. You know, the ratios are fairly close. I think there's one that's a little off. But in general, this would be an example of something that's pretty much, there's just one source of the TCE at the site. A few other things to look at. If you look at the TCE contamination, let me see if I get these right here. In monitoring well, in the shallow, you know, it's fairly similar. What's the difference is between the shallow and the deep. The signatures are, well, let me step back a second. Basically, the ratio of the chlorine and the ratio of the hydrogen in the shallow well are indicative of like a manufactured TCE source. It hasn't been degraded at this point in time, so that those numbers are indicative of a TCE source in addition to a PCE source. And obviously, when you have PCE source, then you have TCE and DC from that as well. And if you look between 1 and 2 at the TCE level, the ratios here, this is in this 31.2, and you go over to the negative 78, that in the shallow was a lot higher, and now it's a negative. Those numbers are indicative that there is some degradation taking place from some degradation of the TCE. So it just shows a lot of different things. And like I said, the whole point of this is you really need to look at the ratios of what's in your source, what's downgrading your source, and take a look at how they're all weighed. There are people that do this for a living. So if you actually need somebody to do that, highly recommend you hire, you know, talk to somebody, because right now I am not the expert. And what that ended up showing is there were multiple discharges in the area. And it turned out after you went and backtracked the PCE, and like this is a surprise by the way, that the PCE was from a former uniform rental service and a dry cleaner. Kind of go figure. There were other TCE sources that were identified out there. Some of it, the TCE was a degradation product, but a lot of it was fresh. And so that was one thing they needed to look at, go out and figure out where the sources of TCE were. And like I said before, there were some of those results showed that there was some PCE degradation, but there was also another source of fresh TCE. Okay. So once that was all taken into account, what do you do? The site in question was the, we go back to the figure of the site. The person that started this investigation was the uniform rental folks. So they established a CEA for their identified source and their identified contamination plume. Since there was some commingling from an unknown source, the TCE, that was reported to the hotline using the off-site groundwater contamination protocol and off-site coming onto your site commingled protocol that we talked about before. An RAO issue was issued for some of the off-site sources that they weren't responsible for and went through that process. The lack of, and like I said before, the lack of the shallow contamination is very difficult to figure out what the source of the TCE was, so further investigation for that needed to take place. Administrative considerations, this is a scenario where an on-site, there was a discharge on-site with contaminations migrating on-site from an off-site source, so that's how that needed to be taken care of. Investigate to show that the contamination from off-site and the subject site was not a contributor. The whole idea is this: is you had to do your off-site source groundwater investigation per the groundwater off-site source and do your PASI and all that, go through the process to make your determination. There's a few, if the contamination, and the investigation shows that the contamination is from an off-site source and from an on-site source, you're obviously required to remediate what's on your site. If it does show that it's from off-site source, obviously you follow the off-site source guidance document as well. All right, that's okay. Yeah, and just that, and if you find out that it's not commingling, you follow the off-site source guidance and then put the RAO notice in your RAO. All right. Okay. The second scenario was a brownfields redevelopment site. I was going from an airport to a mall. There are several zones, aquifer zones contaminated. Once again, there's a deep and a shallow component to this. Originally, it was assumed that there were two different source areas, CSIA, and they did a PA to use another tools to identify this contaminated sources and the RPs on site and off site. In this situation, the CSIA showed significant difference between two TCE signatures at the site and two DNAPL hotspots. And when they went to and not just the CSIA, but all the multiple lines of evidence agreed that there were two different distinct sources. Hope you can see this. Okay, this is also an example that was one of the scenarios that's in the guidance document, I think scenario 5. Just two things to look at here. You have, oops, wrong button. There we go. All right. So this is some of the CSIA carbon data that was the ratios that were determined. So you have this area here and this area here. These are in the upper or the shallow zone. And you will notice that there's two significant differences in the ratios as well as the concentrations. But keep in point that the ratios don't take into account necessarily consideration. So at this point, they looked like there was two sources. So when they went down into the lower zone where things got a little more commingled and a little more mushed together, you can still see from the UZ1 to the LZ1, that ratio is very similar. And also in the area is UZ2 and LZ2, those ratios are within the realm of similar as well. So it's still distinct that there's two sources. When you get out here a little bit more, I think that's when they started to commingle a little bit more, and it wasn't quite so distinctive to figure it out. But long story short, they did find out that there were two sources commingling into the one plume. Okay. Based on some of the ratios and stuff that it's not in the scenario in the document, it goes into a little more detail. Because some of the information that was used could help estimate a CEA duration, because you could figure out these are my molecules, these are their molecules, and come up with some trends. And they decided to proceed with the remediation, complete the remediation, and establish CEA for both of the identified sources. If there was another off-site source, obviously you would have called that in as an off-site source, and just per the department's procedures, if it's an unknown source, the triage unit will evaluate it, and we may get involved if it's potential IEC condition. The on-site discharge was reported and remediated. Obviously, the CDN has to be reported within 14 days. And call the hotline. And obviously, the PRCR has to retain the LSRP and complete the investigation for their discharges.
Okay.
Questions?
All right, this is our last one. Okay, so we're going to open it up to the webinar folks, and we'll see how many of you are still awake. You're looking good. All right, how many days from the hotline call does the person responsible have to submit a confirmed discharge notification? A, 1 day. B, 14, not supposed to say it out loud. B, 14 days. They were awake. C, 2,789 days. Or D, a whole lot of numbers. Okay. There's a smart guy in the back that keeps giving the wrong answer. Okay. All right. So since, you know, we've talked about vacation plans, how many people like the brownies versus the chocolate chip muffins? Brownies? Yeah. The muffins with the chocolate chips in them? Fewer people. Oh, Barry liked them all. Okay, very good. So,
Am I ready?
and Marianne, I have to say, you're doing a bang-up job, and you're going to get Lisa, and you're going to put her in give her a noogie when you see her.
She's probably on the webinar.
Yeah. So I think if we get any complicated questions about this, I think they should send them to you, and we'll get them answers.
Yes.
Yeah. How we doing? Ready? Okay.
Okay. Ooh, oh man, it wasn't going. Woohoo! There's your answer. 14 days.
14 days.
Okay. Yeah. The way I think most of these slides are, you know, they're put together. It's if you found out it was an off-site source, obviously you go. If your forensics indicated that was an off-site source, you'd go through the off-site groundwater source technical guidance document. So I'm just going to kind of bleed through these. And if it doesn't show it's from another site and it's yours, obviously you call the hotline and follow section 5.2 in the guidance on how to call, what to say. Once again, if it is from off-site, you can issue the RAOA and include the notice that it remains on-site from off-site contamination. Okay. And obviously, if it's yours, you're responsible for the entire remediation. But I think in any of these scenarios, if you can demonstrate that it's coming from off-site and not commingling, obviously punt yourself to the off-site groundwater contamination.
Okay. All right. So we do have questions, and we want to thank you for coming. And I'm holding up the green piece of paper that shows your evaluation, and we will collect those. So if there's any questions.
Marianne, if a facility is operating for 20 years and they change their supplier of PCE and TCE over, like, say, several times over the 20 years, will that affect the ratios if they have different suppliers? Okay.
So, in a scenario like that, you may not be able to make the differentiation, but sometimes you can, and
So over time,
it could screw it up, yeah. But
all right. Other questions in the room?
In Mike Vanderhayden's example, and let's assume that the second discharge is a lot worse than the first and there's an off-site migration component. The way that you've described it is that ABC company basically gets to walk after the projected number of years that they would have achieved groundwater quality standards. What does the state do relative to XYZ company in their discharge where there's...
obviously, we recommend that the LSRP and or responsible entity for ABC contact XYZ and tell them what they found. That will get called in, and if you can bifurcate it, they are now on the hook. That there's a number associated with that site, and they still have to meet all the mandatory and regulatory timeframes, hire their LSRP, submit their CDN form. I mean, they are then on the hook. I guess if push comes to shove and it makes it as a enforcement priority, and there's, you know, potential receptors and stuff, and enforcement action may take place if that person doesn't, you know, XYZ doesn't do anything.
Oh boy, lots of questions.
So this is also for Michael's example. It's the simple example has the complicated questions, and the complicated example is the simple questions. So ABC is monitoring, and all of a sudden there's a spike, and they have concluded that there's been a new discharge. Okay, I may have been daydreaming while you were talking about this, but did you do anything, or did, in this case, was anything done other than to monitor the groundwater to actually confirm and determine that there was another discharge? I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so there's probably, you know, as I said, operational history was one of the multiple lines of evidence. You know, I presume you would look at spills to see if there was a spill reported, but XYZ was not a upstanding citizen, so, you know, they didn't report anything, nothing was on the record. I suppose you could knock on XYZ's door and say, hey, can I see your tank reconciliations and stuff like that.
Would there be some, would or would not there be some physical evidence that in the recent past something had happened to result in that additional quantity of BTEX to get into the groundwater? If that were the case, they should have, it seems to me they should have found it. But bottom line is, I think they're right that there was another discharge, but I wasn't convinced.
Well, yeah, and so sort of the point of that was not to get to the weeds of the data and all that. I mean, yes, you probably wouldn't just rely on one data point either, right? You probably have a couple of follow-ups. You might see some LNAPL in wells, you know, that might be evidence. But so the point of that case study was to follow the process, assuming ABC did their due diligence and could make their case. So yes, there's probably 10 other things you could do. That makes sense.
Mary Ann, go back to that question you had of ABC versus XYZ. The key here is XYZ went defunct. There's no longer any XYZ. Now what is the state going to do?
Well, it'll go into the pool of Mr. Cortina, Mr. Enforcement. He's here. He can answer that question.
The one obvious
raised his
response
hand.
to that is you had a different property owner. We would certainly look to the property owner as a responsible party. The property owner, in even the ABC situation, is a statutory permittee. So technically, they're on the hook for the permit, and certainly for the new discharge that occurred under the XYZ operation. In the time frame that you're talking about, certainly our compliance and enforcement folks from the underground storage tank program was pretty much riding herd on UST operators that they had insurance. So that would be certainly one area to look to if they in fact were complying with financial responsibility.
More questions in the room? Because I know we have a couple on the web. I'm not sure if we're going to. Let's see. Great presentation. That was a comment. That's good. Thank you, Ed. It says, in the first case, who ultimately paid for the remediation of XYZ retail? So you're saying they went out, nobody? Nobody. Right now, you don't care, but in general. Okay. In the first case scenario, XYZ was said to have dissolved. That was basically answered. Who is then responsible for the new contamination once the groundwater RAP is terminated? The new RP. Okay. Who should we, of the webinar participants, contact if we don't receive a follow-up email related to processing our CEC certificates? This is a question. So the question is, if you earned your CEC certificate, you actually signed out the way you're supposed to, and you were here the correct amount of time, or on the web the correct amount of time, you can contact me to make sure you are on the list, and that's, I think I'm tfields2@DEP. NJ.gov, NJ.gov, and I'll follow up on it and to see what we have as far as records. But if you're on the list, we send that to the LSRPA, and they send the once you pay the big bucks, that that you get your certificate. And any other questions for any of our speakers? All right, I think they did a great job. We're going to give them all a round of applause. We're going to collect your evaluation forms as you leave. Thank you.